And we welcome you to what we expect will be the final November 2023 episode of Exit Philosophy. It is episode number 30. So we're 30 weeks into this deal. He is Rich Griffin. You can call him Griff. I'm Scott MacArthur. Call me Scotty Mac. Griff's in Oakville, Ontario. I am in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and we are patiently waiting for the Major League Baseball owners meetings, which will take place next week in Nashville, Tennessee at the Gaylord Opryland Hotel and Resort. And if anything comes from those meetings, Griff, I know that you and I will be all over it.
Yeah, they're officially the winter meetings. The owners' meetings are in another place, another time, and at a better hotel.
But they are the meetings of owners, though, right? I mean, owners are...
The winter meetings were invented by the minor leagues, and the major leagues piggyback. That's why they're in cities like Nashville and all the minor league cities, because major league teams just piggyback onto those meetings originally, and now they've become the major league winter meetings, and the minor leaguers can go screw themselves.
I like that, because they've been held in Indianapolis before, right? I never attended meetings in Indianapolis, but we could do at some point a ranking of the cities that have hosted the winter meetings.
Yeah.
San Diego 2014.
Yeah.
San Diego 2014 would be at the top of the list for me in terms of the ones I attended. I think they've been in San Diego since, maybe even last year. Vegas. I didn't get to Vegas. That was after my time covering the Jays, but that would have been fun.
Yeah, I stayed at Bill's Gambling Hall and Casino across from the Bellagio. So I would wrap my night up around 2 or 3 in the morning at the Bellagio lobby bar. Routinely, one of the high-price hookers would go, "Hey, do you need company tonight?" I say, "Can you go across the street to Bill's Gambling Hall and Saloon?" And that was the last I saw or heard of anybody. They would just...
This guy's carrying ones, not hundreds. If he stayed at Bill's Beach Saloon or what?
He showers in the fountain, and that's about it. You know?
Oh boy. Anyway, so if we're ever hard up for content, Griff, we'll do a ranking of the
for sure
of the winter meetings locations.
Well, if the Blue Jays are really quiet at this winter meetings in Nashville, maybe we'll end up having to do that.
Yeah. I just got in, by the way, from a beautiful long walk. I got my ass out of bed this morning. I went for a 2-hour walk, and I'm like, I got to get up this morning because I was checking the forecast, and I saw a lot of rain in it. And sure enough, if I don't walk in the door, and within about 5 minutes, it's raining sideways, and there are massive wind gusts. So here's to timing, and here's to episode 30 already. Where's the time gone?
Yeah,
and
30, and I've really enjoyed all 30 of them, or all 29. I can't speak for 30 yet, but let's go.
Yeah, let's go. It is a Blue Jays podcast. It is a baseball podcast, but we're coming off of U.S. Thanksgiving. Here's the day-old take that so many people have. I really wish we loved our Thanksgiving here in Canada as much as they do down in the U.S., where they take a full 4-day weekend. Thursday's the big day and the dinner, and there's NFL football, but it's not like, you celebrate Thursday and then you got to go back to work Friday, right? Friday is also a day off. Now it's changed a little bit with Black Friday, and, everybody's got an AK-47 down there. And, if there are 2 of you who want that one last TV on the shelf at Walmart, there could be a brouhaha. But I love how it's a 4-day weekend, and it's family, it's food, it's football, it's all of everybody's favorite Fs. So there might be a 4th one in there as well, but this is a PG podcast.
Well, working in Major League Baseball and working for so many years in Montreal with the Expos and then with the Jays, American Thanksgiving shuts down the industry. I mean, there's very few moves that are made. So as a Canadian, I have always celebrated with American Thanksgiving because I don't have to go to the office on Thursday or Friday. And we used to have a tradition in Montreal where we would play basketball every Thursday night with a group of teachers. Michael Farber, the Hall of Fame hockey writer, covered baseball at the time. It was school teachers, lawyers, and Dave Dombrowski would join us. He was a young GM at the time with the Expos, his first GM gig. And since then, he's gone on and obviously become more celebrated. But at the time, he was just a 34-year-old kid getting his first chance to be a GM. And he would play with us on Thursday nights because he spent his winters in Montreal. And so we would go for American Thanksgiving Thursday. It's our basketball night. We would go watch the 1:00 game in Detroit, the 4:00 game in Dallas, drink heavily, go play basketball. There's a lot of charges and travels going on at that point. And then come back and have dinner, which is part of the tradition. And Dave Dombrowski would be with us. We'd go to Mannion's Tavern in Point St. Charles, and we'd sit down, and the place would be jammed, not because it's American Thanksgiving, because it was a good place to eat and drink cheap. And not once, not one person ever came over to Dombrowski and said, "Hey, you're the GM of the Montreal Expos. Hey, good luck. Congratulations. Can I have a picture? Can I have..." Nobody. He was unrecognizable, which in American cities just doesn't happen. And I think he appreciated that. And every GM that's been through there appreciates the fact that if it was a hockey GM, they'd be all over him. Baseball GM, just have your thin rib steak and your 6 tiny draft beers and let's go. American Thanksgiving has been a part of my life, a part of my adult life for 51 years.
Yeah, I was just thinking if he was the general manager of the Habs,
oh my God,
and boy, oh boy, he better have signed those autographs and been polite in both languages.
Yeah,
or there would have been
tabernacle. There'd be a bunch of tabernacles going his way.
There would have been a front page article in the paper the next morning. Not only was Dave Dombrowski standoffish, he wouldn't speak to me in French when he wouldn't give me his autograph.
Correct.
You know, all of that. But yes, the Lions and the Cowboys, I don't have a dog in.
There was there was only 2 games back in the day.
That's right.
And your game with the 49ers was the night game this Thursday. And that, to me, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but that team looks like a Super Bowl team right there.
Yeah, I just like Lions, Cowboys, right? I don't like the Cowboys. It's the historic rivalry stuff with the Niners. But I love how they've added the nighttime game. And now they've added the Black Friday game. It'll be nice when they actually have one next year because it probably won't involve the New York Jets. So there will be 2 NFL teams on the field. And this is a baseball podcast, so I'm not going to do my 10-minute Twitter-worthy diatribe of the fact that I have separation anxiety during the week now because the New York Jets are always in a primetime TV window, and it's like heroin. That first high, and then you just spend the rest of your life chasing it as your life devolves into nothingness. That's like being a New York Jets fan, right? It's just like I miss them, but I'm addicted to them.
Week to week, you can just compare Aaron Rodgers' limp as it gets better and better and better, and they're touting him as being ready for the last 3 weeks of the season or whatever it is. And of course, they'll shift some of those games to prime time if he comes back, and then you'll have your fix. You'll get your Jets fix.
Right, Aaron Rodgers, the guy who would be the 3rd best quarterback in the AFC East behind Josh Allen and Tua Tagovailoa, and could be the 4th best quarterback in the AFC East next year if the New England Patriots draft the right guy with that very high pick that they're going to have, although I wouldn't put that sort of pressure on a rookie. But I don't understand the Aaron Rodgers interest. I know it's New York driven, and I know it's major sports network driven south of the border. So it's almost like we subconsciously just accept the fact that we're supposed to be interested. But I find Aaron Rodgers to be a supremely uninteresting human being. I think he thinks he's 1,000 times smarter than he actually is. He's not a very good teammate. He's brought in a lot of his crappy teammates. Like they just benched Alan Lazard for Friday's game. They're way overpaying him. one of the receivers that Rodgers had in Green Bay. I think if Aaron Rodgers went away, we'd all be better for it.
Well, at least you're admitting that he's on the AFC East podium. Third best, that's bronze right there.
There you go, out of 4 teams. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. But as for my 49ers, Griff, they are legit good. But they are one of a handful of legit good teams. And so I can't sit here and say that they're definitely going to win the Super Bowl. I mean, that would be irresponsible and dumb of me. And I'm certainly not going to tempt karma and tempt fate by getting arrogant. But if they can maintain health, they are going to be a real problem for whoever they face in the playoffs. And if they are eliminated at some point, it will be very costly to the team that does the job because it will come with a lot of bumps and bruises. The 49ers are a very physical team. And I just want to say that as a diehard 49ers fan, and I know we all love the NFL, but we can't possibly watch all 12, 13, 14, or however many games there are on a given weekend. The one way you can expose yourself to me as someone who doesn't actually watch the 49ers play is if in the first couple of sentences discussing the 49ers, you suggest Brock Purdy is not a good quarterback. If you hold that opinion, you're listening to a handful of people on the national stage who have decided that that's the stake they need to drive into the ground and hold firm to it. Brock Purdy is a pretty friggin' good quarterback, and I'm really excited that he's on the team. I think he drives that bus beautifully, and I think he creates plays for some of those star players as well. This kid is good, really good, and getting better.
Irrelevant.
The most relevant, Mr. Irrelevant in that history. And don't you think now?
I want to mention the Buffalo Bills because their game against the Eagles was one of the best games of the season. And I think that they are proving, even in losing, that they're a playoff team. They're not going to have home games. They're going to have to go on, and they got to win all but one. Yeah, they got to win all but one game. I think they can do it and move to the playoffs. And once they get into playoffs, they have a chance to move forward, even if they're not playing at home. You know, they'll be in probably better environments, more controlled environments, and their skilled position players would probably perform as well or better in those conditions. So
my concern for the Bills is all the injuries on their defense, right? I mean, that's my worry for them at this point. But Josh Allen, I thought Josh Allen played a fantastic game yesterday. That one pick was tough, especially the timing of it, but thought he was generally awesome. I thought the Bills got stiffed by a couple of non-calls by the officials that scuttled 2 of their offensive drives. And then, there's always things too about special teams, right? They had a field goal block. They had another one missed. That's 6 points right there that they didn't score, and they lost by what, 4? Right?
Yeah, they have to be better on turnovers, and Josh Allen knows he has to be better. And so the pressure's on them moving forward down the stretch, because with 17 games, probably 10-7, I don't think 9-8 gets you in.
Yeah, it's just the teams that have fallen away, right? Like the Bengals were supposed to be good, and then Burrow's done. They're like even a middle of the pack to middle good team like the LA Chargers.
Well, all those leading teams have 3 losses, so you're right. A couple of those are going to fall away, and maybe have 5 or 6. So there you go. I mean,
yeah, I do like that. There's a bit of a mix and mash in the AFC this year, though. Like you're going to see the Miami Dolphins host a playoff game for the first time in a really long time. So for example, that's different. It's a different stadium to look at when you're watching an NFL playoff game in January. Well, it'd be interesting to see if the Ravens can keep this going. I know the loss of their tight end, Mark Andrews, really hurts, but Lamar Jackson's having a fantastic season. They got a really good defense. So we'll just we'll keep tabs on it. We'll keep eyes on it. I'm geared up for Niners Eagles, and I am addicted to 49ers content, and a lot of my YouTube views, my algorithm, if I pulled up my YouTube page, you'd see it. It's like Rich Eisen show clips or First Things First clips from the FS1 show. Like anything 49ers, that's my YouTube page.
I think it's great if the AFC doesn't have to go through Kansas City, if it goes through somewhere else. And you talked about Miami, but
Right.
It would be nice. Baltimore might even be it. So that would be nice to see a change in that regard. But let's get to baseball. What do you got baseball wise?
Well, as you alluded to, I'm kind of stealing your take. As you alluded to when you texted him, Griff, I think Exit Philosophy is about to take one step up the rung on the ladder. I love how we're making this, or at least I'm making this about us right now, in terms of ranked baseball podcasts in Canada. We're about to lose a baseball podcast in this country. The Gibby Show is going to have to retire because the Gibby Show is going back to a dugout. Citi Field, baby, the New York Mets. John Gibbons, the next bench coach of the New York Mets. Gibby is back in uniform, back in a dugout. And Griff, I'll tell you, it wasn't like any time I would talk to him or see him, I'd be like, so do you think you're ever going to manage again? But, I mean, I was in Lloydminster, Alberta / Saskatchewan with Gibby almost 3 months ago for the Lloydminster Bobcats annual Evening of Champions event, and Gibby was the star attraction that night. And, you know, we had the opportunity because we were together for a couple days to shoot the breeze. And, you know, I just, he would kind of say, you know, like, I'd love to get back in the dugout, but I'm not expecting it. You know, so the fact that this is happening is just, it's great for him. It's great for the game. It's a cool full circle thing. The team that drafted him, he's got a World Series ring from that '86 team. Like, it's just it's proof that good things happen to good people.
Yeah, and I texted him to congratulate him and to thank him for stepping aside so our podcast, as you said, could move up. And his response was, you know, you'd be number one if you get rid of Scotty. So you're still here, and we're still here, and we're like the tortoise in that famous fable. So we'll keep going.
What does he like about me?
Oh, I don't know. He probably watched the podcast.
Well, we had him on the podcast. Maybe we got him hired in New York. Maybe David Stearns looked at that and said, hey, that guest appearance he did in the summer on that podcast from Canada, I really like.
Well, I'm going to take responsibility for getting him an interview in Houston because I said to Gibby, have you been interviewed by the Astros? This was before Dusty, when Dusty was going to be hired. And he said, no, I haven't heard from him. So I called my friends in Houston. I said, you know, Gibby's available. Why don't you interview him? He's a Texas guy. And so the next day he says, I got an interview. And I went, oh, okay, cool. So now he's doing us a return favor here. But I'm looking forward to the series. I think it's in the end of May, early June. I'd have to check my schedule, but I will. With the White Sox against the Mets. Interleague game. Charlie Montoyo, bench coach. John Gibbons, bench coach. We'll see. We'll see who steps up at that moment and which who has bragging rights after that. Former Blue Jays managers, the last two, and we'll see who's the better bench coach.
Yeah, I don't know how well the two know each other, but I'll tell you right now, if you could turn me into Jeff Goldblum from about 40 plus years ago, I would love to be a fly on the wall in that room if those two were able to sit down and have a conversation. That would work for me.
I think I'm one of the few people alive who saw the first major league hit for Charlie Montoyo and the first major league hit for John Gibbons. That's a rare exacta right there.
I forget that story. Did Gibby's first career hit come at the Big O, or was it against the Expos at Shea?
I think it was at Shea, and I was there, and so it came against the Expos, and Montoya's, of course, came at Olympic Stadium after driving in from Ottawa 2 hours earlier from AAA. And so, that's a rare combo right there.
I like that. It's just so good. And I wonder, Gibby, Griff, about Gibby, if there's some value, and I don't, because we always talk about baseball being a copycat sport. And then I think about something like this, and I'm like, well, am I trying to connect too many dots here? But, Bruce Bochy's the defending World Series champion manager of the Texas Rangers. Dusty Baker won the World Series with the Houston Astros a year ago. A couple of guys who've been in the game for decades and decades and decades have forgotten more about the sport than most of us will ever know about the sport. And there's Carlos Mendoza, the ex-Yankees bench coach, going over to Queens, first-time manager. And is there an awareness of the value of having a veteran presence in the dugout once again? And I know the decisions are not going to fall at Gibby's feet, and he is not going to be the one answering to the New York media for decisions that get made in the middle of Mets games, but he'll be a really good sounding board and ideas guy for Mendoza.
Well, I think there is a value to having a bench coach and a manager that have divergent backgrounds and different opinions on analytics and eye test, and to have that combination in the dugout, especially with the bench coach being the latter, because the managers especially managers today, are presented with all the numbers and right after the last game and who you should be playing and where the lane is for your relievers the next day and all that. And to have a manager with a background that doesn't involve as much as that, and if the decisions are made, it's not his decision to go against the analytics, but at least it's there. I really believe that Don Mattingly was not ideal for that bench coach role, and he's better as a offensive coordinator minus the headset. But I think that DeMarlo Hale will be better at that role, the bench coach role with John Schneider, than was Don Mattingly in that one season. Because sometimes if you're not comfortable not running the show like Mattingly with his history as a major league manager with the Dodgers and the Marlins, comes in and now it's not his decision. I remember, and I hate to bring myself back into this again, but when I was coaching, I was always coaching third for the OBA teams, for the Oakville teams, for the Burlington teams, always coaching third. And I went in as a guest coach for when I was with the Jays. I went in as a guest coach for a weekend tournament. And Mike Nightingale, who was my pitching coach and then became manager, had me at first base. And I was so uncomfortable because third base, he noticed. And after 3 innings, he said, "Griff, you want to coach third?" And I said, "Yes, I do." And I went over there, and for the rest of the weekend, I was much more comfortable. And I can see Mattingly, because in times of stress, Mattingly was never in the picture, never in the television picture, never in the when the headset action was going on and it was the wrong time, when he went to the mound and thought it was his first visit, when his second visit took Manoah out. Then the TV cameras, when they scanned the dugout, Mattingly nowhere to be seen. Not next. It's not my decision. I'm backing out of that picture. And so I think that
you don't believe Mattingly was that conscious of cameras and I don't want to be seen in the square box at this moment right now.
Maybe he did,
or he had to take a walk because he was like, "Holy crap."
There was a reason why he wasn't in that shot, whispering in the manager's ear after he messed up. I don't think he was aware when the camera was on the dugout. But it might be like you said, he just had to take a walk and take a deep breath and say, "Oh, holy shit!"
I'm just going to go just going to go fire a piss or something in the bathroom at the base of the dugout, go down the steps and take a breather.
Bottom line is he's a great hitter. He can probably feel comfortable as an offensive coordinator dealing with we talked about it, with 9 individuals rather than a group approach to facing a certain hitter. I think he'll be very good in that role, and you can't do that and also be the bench coach, which is where DeMarlo Hale comes in as associate manager, bench coach. And I think it's a better setup in the dugout. And like every team is now going to many, many more coaches in uniform in the dugout. So for those who question the titles and laugh about the titles, they ran out of regular titles. So now more teams are going to have to make up titles like offensive coordinator. And so it's nothing, it's new, but it's something that's happening everywhere. So to make fun of what the Jays have done is just not right.
Yeah, I think I said last week or the week before, whenever it came up, it's just as likely that in 10 years, every team's going to have an offensive coordinator. Hell, they could have a defensive coordinator, right? Yeah, I mean, they already have pitching coordinators in the minor leagues, guys who sort of keep an eye on everybody in the system, help develop, like, it's all there's no cap in baseball, but there's definitely no cap on how much staff you can have.
There used to be, and then that disappeared. It used to be 5 coaches in uniform. And I remember a couple of times there were extra coaches and they were thrown out of the dugout because you had reached your limit. So then that's changed dramatically. But, you know, Louis Rivera, for example, was third base coach, and he was the defensive coordinator. He'd have that set up right next to the corner of the dugout where he'd have his laptop set up and all the charts and everything, and he would position the infielders. And it was especially important when the shift was allowed. And then, like, I would always wonder, how the hell does Louis do all that stuff? And to your point, now that it's open season on expanding your coaching staff, I think that it makes more sense to have someone just strictly looking at who the next inning is defensively, who's coming up for the other team, and then planning in advance, rather than what Louis did was waving guys to their death at home, coming to the dugout and trying to figure out quickly how the defensive setups are going to be. So I think it's a differentiation, a separation, and it's happening.
Yeah, and in the years you and I were on the beat together, Tim Leeper was doing the outfield, right? And I remember getting to Fenway Park one day, and this must have been September of 2014. And if it was like 2:30 in the afternoon. So, you know, clubhouse didn't open till an hour later because the clubhouse opens to the media 3.5 hours before first pitch. First pitch is usually 7:05-ish. So clubhouse will open 3:30, 3:35. And there's Tim Leeper with a young Dalton Pompey. It's just one example, but I don't know why this stands out in my mind. But there's Tim Leeper with a young Dalton Pompey, who's definitely at Fenway Park for the first time as a player. Whether he and his family ever took a trip and went growing up, I don't know. And Leap they're right near the monster, probably 10, 20 feet on the grass from the warning track, and Leap is pointing up and pointing down, and the ball's going to bounce off the wall this way if it's on this trajectory, or whatever they were talking about. And it's all, there's the data, there's the paperwork, there's the planning. This hitter has a tendency to hit the ball here. This hitter's got power to the opposite field gap. Here's where you need to stand for each of the outfielders for each hitter. But then there's also that work you're doing one-on-one with a new kid who needs to learn the caroms and the bounces off the Fenway Park wall 5 hours before first pitch, right? It's a life dedicated to the details of the sport, hours upon hours upon hours every day.
How about this theory that you just reminded me of, is that, you know, at Fenway Park, you had Carl Yastrzemski, and he was revered as a great Red Sox, but I don't think he was that great an outfielder. He just knew how to play the green monster. Like, he would position himself where he would just have to spin and feel the ball off the wall, short throw to second base. So everybody said, what an arm, what an arm. When in fact, Yastrzemski was the ultimate Fenway Park left fielder. Now, what that reminded me of is the changes that are now being made at Rogers Center, where as you go down the line, you're only going to have 1.5 feet between the foul line and the stands. So, and there's less room in foul territory on the infield side. So where it arches around and then goes down the line with a narrow foul territory in the corner. Now, do you need Matt Chapman and his range at third base when there's less ground to cover in foul territory? I mean, this is a guy who made his reputation at the spacious Oakland Coliseum, making those plays in the bullpen where you're going up the side of one mound and down the other. And then here at Rogers Center, making similar plays, but with less room. Now there's even less room. And in left field, there's less room. Do you need a Kevin Kiermaier and a Dalton Varsho in left field and a Matt Chapman at third? Or can you make do in left field with a guy who's more of a power guy, got decent range, like Lourdes Gurriel or somebody?
But you need the range on the fair balls.
Well, you can position yourself farther away from the line slightly if you don't have to worry about going 12 feet into foul territory to make a catch. You can narrow the gaps, especially if you got Dalton Varsho in center field, who's going to cover a lot of that ground.
I think we both agree that I don't think there's anybody.
Could you have a Candelario at third base who's not as good as Chapman?
Well, my concern,
or
just before we bounce around, like I think we all agree they need more power out of the outfield. Like they have to address.
That's why I'm saying a left fielder with power.
Right.
That doesn't necessarily have to equal Dalton Varsho in terms of defense.
But that's why I love the idea. And no, when I say this, I am not equating signing this guy with winning a World Series, but I do think he can help a playoff bound team. Hell, he proved that last year and has proven it in the past. But like a Michael A. Taylor is a guy who can hit for pop against left-handers. He's a right-handed hitter. I think he's a great offset for Varsho. He's a defensive replacement late in the game for a corner outfielder who doesn't have a very good glove, if you have one, in games where you have the lead and Taylor hasn't started. Like, I think there's a way to sort of settle into the middle of all that. As for Jeimer Candelario, you would certainly be regressing significantly defensively from Chapman. I mean, there's no arguing that. My concern with Candelario, Griff, is there enough of an offensive track record that would justify, or at the very least, make a Ross Atkins, Mark Shapiro comfortable with the notion of giving him a 3 or a 4-year contract at whatever the dollar figure is. If he's a 12, 15, $17 million a year player at this point, is there enough of a track record of success offensively that you'd be comfortable with a Candelario? If you ask me what he's going to be in 2024, I can't answer that for you because we've seen both sides of it.
As a switch hitter, I'm looking at that as an aspect of it, being another left-handed bat in the lineup. But brings up another thing. We had taping discussion today, and you convinced me that Soto might be a good call to play left field. So go over that argument because I was convinced.
Yeah. So, I mean, I really do want Don Mattingly to wear a headset as the offensive coordinator. I think you got to go with the full look. I really do. I really do. But you know what would help an offensive coordinator for real? If there was an offensive player who prioritized getting on base at or near the top of the order. And Juan Soto's a guy, Griff, who's going to get on base 250, 270, 290 times a year because he's going to walk 120 times. And, he's a left-handed bat. I'm beating the drum for Cody Bellinger. I'm beating the drum for a consequential player here. Now, Juan Soto's 1 year away from free agency. So that is your red flag.
And he's going to arbitration, and he made $23 million in 23. So
right. So he's going to make a lot of money, 30 million, 28, 30, $32 million, whatever the hell it's going to be in arbitration in his final year. Could you convince him to stay? I don't know the answer to that question. It doesn't feel likely because he's a superstar, and we know that superstars like moths to lights, or in some cases, those little electric tennis racket style things that everybody has at the cottage. Sometimes you do get burned. They flock to the big markets, but
how about...
I think that the Jays need a player who brings not that guys are actively not trying to get on base, but who brings a mentality, like a Joey Votto level mentality of, I got to get on base. Juan Soto, we know, will happily take a walk. And he'll do it 130 times.
Right. And even for one season, which would be Soto before free agency, the Blue Jays need someone because they're building that whole lower level on star power. They're building the new luxury suites, and they need to sell out in that first year. And what better way than to bring in a acknowledged superstar to the game? They have Bo Bichette under contract for the next 2 seasons at a very reasonable rate. So one of the next 2 years is pretty much the only time that you can have Bo and Vlad and another superstar. And so next year is the year, everything coming together, the confluence of need and ability, and with foul territory being, not that Soto is a donkey out in the outfield, but you don't need to worry about that. So now you've got a star player, and you talk about the first inning and about guys that are aggressive and the Blue Jays' slow start. When you have Bo and Springer and Vlad batting in the first inning, how many innings did we see where there would be 7 or 8 pitches, under 10 pitches, and the opposing pitcher be walking to the dugout because of the aggressiveness of the early part of the Blue Jays batting order? To me, right, Bo, where he ended up batting 4th, is an important aspect of this lineup, because if he comes up in the first inning, he's going to be hacking. But if he's batting 4th, there has to be somebody on base. There will be somebody on base.
Right.
But otherwise, you got him hacking at a first pitch. You got Vlad, if he's in one of his anxious moods, hacking at breaking ball off the plate. And Springer goes up always being aggressive. Now you throw Soto in the mix as a left-handed hitter, a 1-year rental, and go over for me what the Padres gave up to the Braves to get him there in the first place. Because it wasn't, right. It was a lot of bodies, it was a lot of names, but how many of them turned out great?
Well, the Nationals have 2 of the players they acquired. There are 2 who have come up to the big leagues so far: CJ Abrams and Mackenzie Gore. Now, Mackenzie Gore made 27 starts for the Nationals last year and I always go by ERA plus, which is kind of like the OPS plus for pitchers, where 100, based on this equation, park adjustments, and et cetera, based on the equation, 100 is always the league average. Mackenzie Gore had a 97 ERA plus last year, which makes him 3% worse than the average major league pitcher last year. And CJ Abrams is a middle infielder who was worth about 3.5 WAR for the Nationals last year, but who was slightly below the league average as a hitter in OPS plus, same metric. Otherwise, it's a bunch of kids. Jarlin Susana isn't even 20 years old yet. He's in the minor leagues. Robert Hassel, James Wood. James Wood actually is 21 years old and had a really nice second half of his season after a promotion to Double-A. He's an outfielder, so maybe he's on the come up. Baseball Reference has him listed as somebody who can play all three positions, although at 6'6", 240, I don't think that body type plays center field for very long. But my point is, Griff, that deal was made 2 or 3 years ago, and the payoff for Washington, if there's going to be one, is not overly apparent yet.
Yeah, so it reminds me in a way of the two deals that Alex Anthopoulos made in 2015 for Tulowitzki from Colorado and for David Price from Detroit. How many of those? There were a lot of bodies involved, and at the time, people were going, "Well, you know, you've stripped the farm system, you've dug deep into the farm system." But in terms of who panned out for the other teams, the Jays went to 2 straight postseasons at that point. But how about the Rockies and the Tigers? What did they get out of those deals? I mean, there were a lot of bodies.
Yeah, I mean, Jeff Hoffman.
Yeah, he had a good year.
But let's be respectful to Jeff Hoffman because he's a good leverage reliever now. But I will always revert to Pat Henkin. And in Pat's time, it was maybe a little different now because some guys do come up as relievers. But in Pat's time, it was a reliever is a failed starter, right? Jeff Hoffman didn't succeed.
Was big on that.
Yeah, that was Pat Henkin's. That was Pat Henkin's thing, right? And I don't think he's alone, especially pitchers of his generation, in holding that opinion. But you know, so Jeff Hoffman has found himself as a leverage reliever for the Philadelphia Phillies 8 years after the trade. Right?
Yeah.
You know, what are you conflicted over with Matt Boyd? 2 decent, I'm not going to call them good, 2 decent seasons with the Detroit Tigers. Is he even still in the game? He probably is.
He's a free agent.
He probably is somewhere, but you know, he's not.
Jays could sign him to a 1-year deal.
Yeah, Detroit's plans now, and like Miguel Castro,
he's around. Yeah, he's hung around. Yeah.
He's pitched for a handful of teams, the Yankees, the Orioles.
In terms of Tulowitzki and David Price, those deals were worth it in hindsight. And you know, Mark Shapiro is always strong about you can't judge a deal until 3 or 4 years down the road. Well, it's 8 years down the road with those 2015 deals, and they were great deals, it turns out, even though a lot of the farm system was handed over for those 2 players that were very important to what the Blue Jays were trying to do at that time. And to me, Juan Soto is important to what the Blue Jays are trying to do at this time. So whether you go down and with the reduction in the size of farm systems, you got 4 farm teams, and then you got the complex teams in Arizona and Florida. You got a Dominican summer team. And it just, you got a draft and you got free agency. To me, you can afford to send decent prospects to satisfy what the needs are of the San Diego Padres for 1 year of Juan Soto, and you won't be stripping the farm system of all the good players, because they do have some players at the lower levels. You would have to send 1 or 2 major league players for the Padres, although you point out ownership has changed because of the death of their owner, and we're not sure how serious they are in 2024 about winning that NL West.
Right, and their TV revenue locally is in the toilet because their regional sports network went tits up in the middle of last season, right? And that's going to be an issue
with 14 teams.
For 14 teams, and a lot of them are the quote unquote small market teams, Griff, which look, these are the sorts of topics where I just wait for Jeff Passan or somebody who's real bright in these areas to write an opus, and then I take it all in and I'm like, yeah, geez, you know, like that makes sense. But my concern is not that it's going to be an excuse, but that the already really tight windows for some of these small market teams are going to get even tighter in terms of contention. You know, that we're going to see a bunch more teams try to be the Tampa Bay Rays and never succeed at doing it, but try to be the Tampa Bay Rays, where they squeeze the blood out of the stone with the pre-arbitration eligible players who step in and play like veterans and have great seasons. And yeah, maybe we'll keep them around for their first year of arbitration eligibility because they're still kind of a $4, $5, $6 million player. But the moment that second year of ARB eligibility and an 8-figure salary comes into play, we're trading them. And I'm not pro parity per se. I'm pro merit, but I really don't want to see 15, 16, 17, or 18 teams taking a dump in April every single season because they're not, you know, a significant chunk of their revenue has disappeared on.
Well, I mean, there's another way of looking at it. You look at a team like the Twins, and they've already said that they're going to be cutting revenue. And I read an article where 20% of team revenues come from regional sports networks. And with Bally going belly up, then that's 14 teams that have players in that category, arbitration eligible guys, some of them already making 10 million to 15 million. Twins have 4 of those guys. So if I was Ross Atkins going to the winter meetings in Nashville, I would be looking at teams like that with players in that category of veteran but not free agent, and I'd be looking to take advantage, and God bless them for trying to compete like the Rays. I mean, you look at the Rays, they're got Tyler Glasnow, their best pitcher, on the market, and they're not sure what Shane McClanahan's going to do. I think maybe the Rays bubble is bursting, you know.
Well, McClanahan's out for 2024, more or less, right?
And if
Glasnow's been hurt for most of the last 2 years, but he's also getting into that service time area where, you know, he becomes expendable in Tampa Bay's eyes.
Yeah. So there are teams that I think that you can take advantage of if you're a have team with a TV network that is thriving, like I believe Sportsnet is, and the Yes Network with the Yankees and the Mets and the Cubs. There's traditional power teams that like to spend, that don't have those problems with their regional sports networks, but the 14 teams plus that do are ripe for the taking, as far as I can see, as being a ruthless opposing GM.
Yeah. Well, I see both sides of it. And I think the Jays are in the have category now and are behaving like haves, which is good and important for the city, the team, the fan base, all of that. I really hope for the health of the sport that they get this figured out, Griff, because if you look at it, and I mean, it's not like you and I or anybody else around these parts are losing a lot of sleep over the fate of a team like the Cincinnati Reds. But, you know, Joey Votto is a career, at least to this point, a career Cincinnati Red, and all of the best years of Joey's career were spent in Cincinnati because of the influx of that RSN Cash a decade and a half ago. And that's what gave a team like Cincinnati, Ohio. Cincinnati's a city on the Kentucky border with Ohio. It's not tiny, but it's not a major market by any stretch of the imagination. And where do the Reds come up with $225 million over 10 years for a wonderful player like Joey Votto? Well, it's RSN Cash. And if you've done long-term deals with your RSN to continue broadcasts like the Padres did, the Diamondbacks did, other teams are coming up against it, you've listed some of them, and all of a sudden that money that you'd agreed to and that you anticipated coming in is just going to fall away. I mean, that can lead to a lot of required knee-jerk reactions. And if it's 20% of revenue, as you say, for a team, and you have a hypothetical $100 million payroll, and you say, well, we're going to cut for every dollar we've lost, in anticipated RSN revenue, we're going to cut $1 a player payroll. Well, you're a very different team in this day and age, going to an $80 million payroll from what would have been a $100 million payroll. And I know that most payrolls are way higher than that, so it's even more significant on a percentage basis. So it's just, I got concerns about competitiveness and interest in certain markets as a result of all this.
Well, Scotty, I think it's only going to be a 2 or 3 year blip in terms of reduced revenue for those teams that we're talking about, because I think baseball has to be headed, and it's going to be the healthy revenue, broadcast revenue, cities, teams, franchises are going to realize that it's a better game when everybody can compete on an equal level. And I think it's going to go to direct streaming of baseball games to the customer. And they say that can't happen until all 30 teams are on board with it. And so obviously the teams that are in revenue producing trouble with their regional sports networks are going to be the first ones in line for that. But they can't do it on their own. It has to be a Major League Baseball initiative. And therefore, it's going to take a couple of years before the Yankees and the Blue Jays and other teams that don't have that problem realize that for the health of Major League Baseball, they need to participate in that. And it's not going to be great for the customer, I don't think. I'm not sure. But,
it'll be fascinating because, Sportsnet's got an app, right? I presume Yes has an app. I honestly don't know because I've never attempted to download it or even looked it up, but I would imagine that they don't have one, they're working on it. So yeah.
I go online and type, I'm not sure whether they do either, but I go online and type in Yes, and they go, what? And I go, yes. And they go, what? Go. So I can't tell.
Hey Siri, yes. No.
Anyway, I think that this window is an opportunity for the Blue Jays and other teams to take advantage of the have-nots that are losing 20% of potentially 20% of their payroll, and also can't figure out what to do with players like Juan Soto, which to me, I didn't even think about it as a possibility until we did the preamble of this podcast, and then you convinced me. But
I just with Soto, he's the prototypical player you want, and if you haven't followed him all that closely either, because he's been in Washington, although he did win a World Series with the Nats he's still a very young player, but is an extremely young player. Or if you haven't followed him as closely the last couple of years because he's been out west in San Diego and a lot of his games are late at night, he's not going to hit you 45 home runs. But he is going to get on base 280 times a year, and he's going to do a lot of that walking, and he'll hit 25 to 30 home runs. And I think he brings an approach that others may just through osmosis begin to emulate a little bit. It's an idea, because the whole conversation we've been having up until this point, Griff, and it's been sprinkled through different episodes, is that, I don't see the path here for the Blue Jays in terms of the holes they need to fill. They've got enough positional holes they need to fill. And I don't, barring a big trade that's unforeseen at this point, I'm not really looking at the free agency pool and thinking they're going to knock this out of the park, because really I don't think there's a lot you can knock out of the park. But unless there's appreciable improvement from players already on this roster next year, I don't see a lot changing. So the Sotos of the world or the Bellingers of the world, one would be a trade, one would be free agent if you went down one of those two paths. I'm not saying either's likely. Those are impact moves. And I think the Jays are in a position financially to be able to do it, especially on a short term.
I would disagree with you on not on the positions that will be changed. I think of the 4 positions that need upgrade, which is third base, second base, one outfield, probably left outfield with the ability to play center and DH/first base. I think they'll make a move to improve 3 of those 4 and leave 1 for internal improvement. And if you have Kevin Biggio, who showed an improved ability to play third base, plus an ability that we knew existed to play second base, if he's sort of your wild card, you can go outside and make the change either at third base or second base. And that other, I mean, you have Davis Schneider that everybody's high on. You have Aurelvis Martinez that could be the Josh Young of the Blue Jays in 2024, needs to be if they leave that position open. Barger maybe if he improves, but you can only leave 1 of those 4 positions. You have to go outside to fill 3 of those 4 positions.
Right, I understand that, but what I'm saying is, to go back to a name that we were discussing earlier, just as an example, signing Jeimer Candelario fills the hole at third base, but does it appreciably improve the team over what they had last year?
Only
and
if
my
you
answer
fill
to that
in 2 of
question
those other
is
positions.
I
Only
don't
if
know.
you fill in left field with an offensive player now that is less room to cover in the outfield, and leave second base open, but bring in a DH with a little bit of clout left-hand hitter so that Vlad and Bo and George Springer can have days off their feet as the right-hand hitting DH. So you need a left-hand hitter, a veteran guy as a DH/first baseman. And there's like 3 or 4 or 5 of those names out there that you could sign, but you need to fill 3 of those 4. And if Candelario is one of them, not the most important one, but one of them, I think you can get by with that.
All right. Well, we will see where this all goes. And when we get together next Monday, the winter meetings will just be getting underway. So there could be.
I got one more. I got one more thing before we wrap.
Well, we got Jose, right? On the Hall of Fame
I
ballot.
got 2 more things. And this one I wanted to get in there because people talk about Ohtani and how it's imperative that the Blue Jays participate in signing Ohtani, because even if he's only DHing in 2024, the value of $50 million is worth it, and $500 million is worth it. Now, I looked at the top 10 contracts in the top 20 contracts in Major League history, and total value, not annual average value, but total value. And of the top 20, only Corey Seager at 9 and A-Rod in 2009 have ever won a World Series. So you got 20 contracts, and only 2 out of the 20 have produced a World Series. You got Trout, Betts, Judge, Machado, Lindor, Tatis, Bryce Harper, who won before he signed his big contract, Stanton, Seager, Garrett Cole, Devers, Turner, Bogarts, A-Rod, Arenado, Miggy, Strasburg, and Anthony Rendon. So are you saying that unless the Blue Jays sign Ohtani and participate in this ridiculous bidding contest for $500 million, that they can't win a World Series? Well, these numbers disprove that fact. 2 out of the top 22 contracts have ever won a World Series. So having the most expensive player does not a winner make.
When you say you, are you referring to me?
It's
have I said that?
It's a royal you.
Oh, it's a royal you. Okay. Cause you
did not say that.
Okay. I feel like you've been in conversations.
In fact, nobody in the Maritimes has said that. So you're
okay. I feel like you might be having a reaction to like somebody with an X handle like Adam Avocado 6824193 who's been unhappy with you, or
I don't know,
or something.
It's just a Thanksgiving hangover that I got.
So Mookie Betts is just because I don't remember everything, Griff. and I remember significantly less now than I used to. Mookie Betts had not signed his massive extension with the Dodgers when they won the World Series in 2020.
Correct. It was the next year.
It was
So
the next year.
like if
Okay.
it's Vlad or Bo and they win and you sign, I guarantee you're not going to win again. So it's the same players making less money guarantees the win.
Okay, so it's like the NFL. You want your quarterback to be elite, but on a rookie contract, so you can pay everybody else. And then, so I like this. We'll come back to this in a year, and I'll say to you, Griff, can't give Bo or Vlad $250, $300 million, because if the Blue Jays put them into the top 20 of players paid all time, the Jays are never going to win a World Series in this era.
That's worth a discussion a year from now. Yes.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's go to Jose Bautista on the Hall of Fame ballot for the first time.
Yeah. So, first of all, when I'm looking at the names on this, the first time names on the Hall of Fame ballot, I'm like, holy crap, it's been 5 years. And it's been 6 years. It's been 6 years since Jose left Toronto, and then he bounced around the National League East in 2018 before retiring. But wow, we're at the point where it's been 5 years since Adrian Beltre walked away. It's been 5 years since Jose walked away. Adrian Beltre is a Hall of Famer for me of the players on this list. That's inarguable. One of the great third basemen of his generation, and arguably of all time when you factor in his defense as well. Jose, Griff, we got to see him play every day through his prime years. And I just think for Jose, he has probably say this about a lot of guys who played in a lot of places. But if Jose could have taken his 6-year period from 2010 through 2015, those 6 seasons, if he could only have locked it in maybe 4 or 5 years younger. And I don't want to change how the history played out, because maybe he would have found it in Pittsburgh or somewhere else and never been a Blue Jay. So I understand that when I play this game, I could be fiddling with even the hypothetical. But if Jose had found what he found at age 29 or 30 when he was 24 or 25, maybe he is a Hall of Famer, because I think those 6 seasons he put together in Toronto from 10 through 15 were Hall of Fame level baseball. It just wasn't long enough for him to be a Hall of Famer when it's all said and done.
Yeah, that's part of the logic that I hold with Jose, and I will vote for him his first time on the ballot. I will vote for him knowing that he's not going to make it that ballot, maybe ever. Likely ever, but I will vote for him the same way that I believe that Carlos Delgado's career deserved more recognition than it got. But my theory, then, I've told Carlos this, is that his best seasons taking place before wall-to-wall game availability on the internet and playing in Toronto with some tremendous offensive seasons, and as a clubhouse leader and as a man, were overshadowed by later in his career when he went to the Marlins and then went to the Mets and ended his career with the Mets, and was not the same Carlos Delgado. But we've talked about it off air also, the number of Hall of Fame voters who were in that New York City area. That's all they remember of Carlos Delgado, is the Carlos that they saw at the end of his career. So if you
his hip was gone, right?
Yeah, if you have 100 voters in the New York City, in the New England area, New York City, that see Carlos Delgado as that guy, then he is out of luck, and the same as you're saying about Bautista. If Bautista's career had been somewhere else with those 5 or 6 years, I think he'd have a better chance, especially if it was in New York. And when I say there's a New York bias, it's only for the Hall of Fame, not for the individual awards, because the individual awards for 15 cities each gets 2 votes. So you don't have that same unbalanced voting system for the MVP, the Cy, the rookie. manager of the year, that sort of thing that you do for the Hall of Fame, where it's retired voters and voters that haven't seen a game in a while, but they do see it on TV, and that's the Carlos Delgado they saw, and that worked against them.
I'll take it one step further, Griff, and it goes back a couple of years prior to him joining the Mets in New York, and it's when Bush went into Iraq and Carlos took a stand by not standing at the top of the dugout steps for the magic patriotism that always goes on in the middle of the seventh inning at Yankee Stadium. And that caused, at that time, still very recently removed from September the 11th, 2001, that caused a furor. Carlos was behaving from his conscience and made a decision. And I think when you combine that with the fact that, he had the hip issues and health was starting to catch up to him during his time with the Mets, I think that's held against him. I don't think it should be. I think it is, though, because, maybe it would be viewed differently today, although I doubt it, because I've never known Americans to be self-assured enough to have a sense of humor about themselves. Like, they take that stuff personally.
I remember at a winter meeting I forget where it was, probably in Nashville, since they're all in Nashville. But I remember at a winter meeting standing at a bar, imagine, and
liar.
It was when Carlos Delgado had his free agency, and I was standing next to Bruce Keeson, who used to be the Pirates sort of side-arming starting pitcher World Series years, and he was now scouting for the Baltimore Orioles. And I said to him, are the Orioles interested in Carlos Delgado as a free agent? And he said, no, he won't stand for God Bless America. Screw him. And that was an attitude, that cut into his earning power, but he stood by his beliefs, and that's what it did with his career. And I think it had something to do with his Hall of Fame as well as the hip injury that we talk about.
Yeah, I think that is and by the way, like when I bring that up, that's not that my opinion matters. That's not a black mark on Carlos for me, but it is for a lot of people. Whether it should be or not is a matter of, again, personal opinion and a matter of self-reflection, and we know that is lacking in this world.
And it's not that Carlos Delgado was that political, because when the Blue Jays were playing in Puerto Rico, I said to him, you're so popular, I bet you could win and be governor of Puerto Rico. And he looked at me and he said, no effing way.
I don't need that headache.
No. So it wasn't a political thing as much as a belief in, and even Felipe Alou. I remember walking through the bullpen at Shea Stadium with him on July 4th. And of course, the fireworks were going off in the stadium, and he was not happy. We had just won the game. And I'm walking towards the bus down the long hall to the bullpen. And as we emerge into the bullpen and the fireworks are blowing out overhead, I said, what's wrong? And he went, this reminds me of Santo Domingo with the American troops. I went, oh, okay.
All right.
So he did not appreciate that. And it's all part of the DNA of these guys, and you have to understand it. And I understood what Felipe was saying. It wasn't an anti-American thing. It was an anti-American loud noise thing because of how it affected him as a child. So
right, yeah. It's like fireworks, right? I mean, when it's Victoria Day weekend up here or 4th of July in the States or wherever, people are like, oh, please respect the fact that, for dogs, this scares the crap out of them. There are also people who have come to Canada from war-torn areas, especially children, who may have grown up with bombs going off around them at times, and these noises can rattle them. Like it's just awareness. Yeah. Right. It doesn't mean we have to understand the lived experience of another person, but that person lived that experience. And we can't take that away from them, or B can't take away how they feel about the experience that they lived through, which is another thing that happens way too often in this world these days. But we're not going down that path.
Not this episode anyway.
Not this episode. Yeah, that'll be like exit philosophy rants.
Right.
You know, we'll just but as for Jose being on the ballot, Griff, I'm glad you're gonna give him some love, and maybe he ends up with 5% that he stays on the ballot another year or two. And
to me, that's the thing, is you can't just throw a blanket over the vote and say that the BBWA is totally wrong if he doesn't get 5% of the ballot, like Joe Carter didn't get, and everybody's going, wow, those idiots, those baseball writer idiots, they don't know what they're talking about. The bottom line is, it's an individual vote. There's 500 people that have to consider the ballot individually. So to say that 5% of you need to value Jose Bautista or Joe Carter, it's an individual thing. And if it doesn't add up to 5%, then it doesn't add up to 5%. It's not like an automatic. Like, I can vote for the Green Party and know I'm going to be wrong, but you still do it because it's your belief.
Yeah.
Done.
Not wrong, just that they're not going to win.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not trying to pick winners. You're trying to pick to your beliefs. And Jose Bautista, to me, is, and Carlos Delgado was, and Mark Burley, when he first appeared on the ballot, was. And so I'm not apologizing to anyone for any vote that I've ever made.
Yeah. Well, I just know the 6 years from particularly 10 through 15, Jose was still a contributor in 16, struggled in 17, but still contributor on that playoff team in 16. So really make it 7 seasons. Even 2009, he started to emerge. I mean, that September of 09 was really special. So maybe I'm like Seinfeld and Elaine down at Jerry's parents. I'm like, well, yeah, except I'm going in reverse. Oh, you know, if you get rid of sleeping and meals, and it's like, it's not 4 days, it's 20 minutes where we'll be leaving in 20 minutes. Well, with Jose, well, maybe it's not 5 or 6 years. It's 7. No, it's 8. But his run here in Toronto, if he'd been able to stretch that out for maybe double the time, he'd be in the Hall. I mean, he was as we said, top 5 player in Blue Jays history, rightful place on the level of excellence, and not diminished.
One of the franchise's most important players, which is
without question, and not diminished.
Yeah,
not diminished in the least if he doesn't get to the 5%.
Right.
But a wonderful, wonderful career with the Blue Jays. And with that, we'll wrap it up. So next Monday, the winter meetings kick off in Nashville. I'm not going to be available, but Griff has decided that a week Thursday, he is going to bring 8 hours of extensive Rule 5 draft coverage. Sorry. No, you didn't. You did. No, I'm not. No, you're not. You're not going to open up and go YouTube Live 8 hours of Rule 5 draft. That's when you know we've winklered and jumped the shark, the Fonz. But we will be back next Monday, and as we promised to you last week, and we'll continue to promise today, it may mean more a week from now when things happen. If things happen, when things happen, Griff and I will make sure that we are available to bring you quick reaction to anything that the Blue Jays do over the course of the winter meetings and leading into the holiday season.
And prior to the winter meetings, Ross Atkins is going to be available to the Toronto media. So we'll have a better idea next Monday when we record, or he'll have a better idea of what he should be doing because I'm going to tell him.
There you go. And if he didn't bring a paper and pen, don't worry. He's probably recording and taking notes on his phone, and he will be armed in Nashville with Griff's wisdom. And then he'll proceed to do the exact opposite. Jays will win 100 games next year, win the World Series, and you know,
you have to understand your audience. That's all.
Yeah, that's all. That's
and
all.
If he wants to do the opposite of what I'm saying, then maybe
and
I'm
it works.
Him the opposite of what I want.
Oh, reverse psychology. I like it. GriffsThePitch.com is where you can get all of Griff's work. He continues to write columns here in the off season, continues to have great conversations with current and former Blue Jays and former Montreal Expos. You also get the Exit Philosophy podcast posted to griffsthepitch.com. If you are listening to this podcast, we thank you very much. And we want to let you know that we have a YouTube page at youtube.com/Exit Philosophy. Barring the unforeseen throughout this week, our next time with you will be next Monday as the winter meetings heat up in Nashville, Tennessee. Have a wonderful week, and Griff, we will chat to you in 7 days.
Thanks, everyone, for listening. Thanks, Scotty, and we'll talk to you next week.